Hello and welcome to World News on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. And we start with the latest update from the Vatican following the passing of Pope Francis on Monday morning. The Vatican has announced the Pope's funeral will take place this Saturday, April 26th at 10 a.m. local time. By decision of President Andrzej Duda, the day of Pope Francis's funeral will be a day of national mourning here in Poland. The passing of Pope Francis has initiated a mourning period in the Vatican and marks the beginning of an ancient tradition to select a new pontiff. The leader of the Roman Catholic Church died Monday morning at his residence in the Vatican's Casa Santa Marta at the age of 88. The Vatican has released a photo of Pope Francis in his open coffin, dressed in a red robe with the papal mitre on his head and a rosary in his hand. The image was taken in the chapel of the Casa Santa Marta, Francis' residence at the Vatican. News of the Pope's passing came unexpectedly as he was present at Easter celebrations over the weekend. Just one day before his death, Pope Francis dedicated his Easter message and the annual Urbi et Orbi blessing to world peace, global disarmament, and the release of prisoners in Gaza. However, in his final months, Francis's health was in severe decline. He was hospitalized for 5 weeks from February the 14th for double pneumonia, which became the most serious health crisis of his 12-year papacy. On Monday evening, the Vatican released the Pope's death certificate, detailing the cause of the Pope's death. The Vatican physician determined the Pope died of a stroke, resulting in irreversible cardiovascular collapse. World leaders, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, and US President Donald Trump have all confirmed they will travel to the Vatican to pay their respects. Argentina's President Javier Milei, who will lead his country's delegation, and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva are also expected to attend. Lula, who declared a 7-day mourning period for the Pope Francis in Brazil, expressed his sorrow, stating, "Humanity loses today a voice of respect and welcome for others." Polish President Andrzej Duda also declared April 26th, the day of Pope Francis' funeral, a day of national mourning. He and the First Lady, Agata Kornhauser-Duda, will attend the ceremony commemorating the late Pope. The Pontiff's funeral is expected to be an emotional farewell to the first non-European Pope in 13 centuries, with leaders from around the world gathering to honor his legacy. Pope Francis left behind his last will and testament detailing his burial wishes. Written in 2022, the document reflects his commitment to simplicity and humility. The Pope requested to be laid to rest in the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome. The choice departs from tradition, as popes are traditionally buried in St. Peter's Basilica.
In the will, Pope Francis asked for his tomb to be located between the Pauline Chapel and the Sforza Chapel in the Basilica, with no other title but his papal name, Franciscus, inscribed on it. The tomb should be simple, without any decorations. He also expressed gratitude for the prayers of those who have supported him, adding that the suffering in his final years was offered to the Lord for peace and brotherhood among nations.
The world continues to mourn the loss of Pope Francis, who passed away on Monday. His image is prominently featured on the front pages of numerous newspapers throughout Europe today.
The obituaries in multiple media outlets underline the late pontiff's progressive or even revolutionary agenda. The English Times called Pope Francis an outsider with a mission to change the Catholic Church. The French outlet La Croix labeled him a reformer, and in Spain's El País, he's referred to as the Pope who shook everything. He is also remembered for his humility and the focus he put on the world's most vulnerable, granting him the title of the People's Pope.
Pope Francis will be remembered as a humble servant, a tireless advocate for immigrants and the impoverished, and a passionate voice for those in need. His calls for social justice, critique of unchecked capitalism, and urgent pleas for climate action showed his commitment to creating a better world, not only for the Catholics. Here's our report in the extraordinary 12 years of his papacy.
From the moment he became Pope in 2013, Pope Francis's pontificate has been shaped by a clear and enduring message: peace.
May the sound of arms be silenced in war-torn Ukraine. May there be the boldness needed to open the door to negotiation and to gestures of dialogue and meeting in order to achieve a just and lasting peace. May the sound of arms be silenced in the Middle East.
One of his most symbolic gestures and a particularly striking moment of his pontificate was in April 2019, when he knelt to kiss the feet of South Sudanese leaders at the head of a country grappling with a horrific civil war.
I think that today in the world, this is the greatest plague, the sale of weapons.
Francis left a global mark with his message of peace, but also interreligious dialogue, most powerfully embodied by his historic 2021 visit to war-torn Iraq. This was the first ever papal visit to the country, where he held a symbolic meeting with Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, the spiritual leader of millions of Shia Muslims.
Iraq will always remain with me in my heart. I ask all of you, dear brothers and sisters, to work together in unity for a future of peace and prosperity.
Through various channels and rhetorics, Francis upheld the notion of mercy for one another.
People with homosexual tendencies are children of God.
He was a man who cared about the renewal of the Catholic Church. He cared about emphasizing mercy, which other popes also taught, but he seemed to have a special focus on this topic. He focused on the matter of the sick and the poor.
Despite stirring controversy, the Pope encouraged pastoral workers to welcome those who cohabit without marriage, as well as divorced and remarried individuals. And he sounded a global call to protect the planet.
Christian brothers and sisters, in the commitment to care for creation as a sacred gift of the Creator, let us stand with the victims of environmental and climate injustice.
During his 12 years, the pontiff made 47 trips outside of Italy, visiting more than 65 states and territories, clocking up more than 465,000 kilometers, and was prepared to travel more if his health had allowed it.
On the second day of the war, I went to the Russian embassy and said I was ready to go to Moscow to see Putin.
The pontiff kept working until the end. On Palm Sunday, he met U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. In his final Easter Urbi et Orbi, his annual global blessing, delivered just a day before his death, the Pope once again urged world leaders to lay down their arms and return to dialogue, thus concluding his pontificate of peace for peace. Reporting for TVP World, I'm Aisha Baja.
One of Pope Francis's defining characteristics was his deep humility, says Father Stanisław Tashimski, Vice President of the Catholic Information Agency. He joined TVP World to share his memories of the late pontiff.
Surely he expressed in his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. It means to show to the world that the gospel is joy, and that the task of every Christian is to accept the gospel and to take the gospel to the world, to be disciples, but also missionary disciples. It is one of the keys he used early, and even he was probably one of the reasons why he was a candidate at Conclave in 2013, was that he took a very active part in gathering of Latin American bishops in Aparecida in 2007. He was one of the editors of the final document, and it was here where he was very visible. So people, cardinals, bishops around the world noticed his presence and his energy, his proposal to reach especially the poor, those marginalized migrants.
In the wake of Pope Francis passing, the Vatican now enters a significant transitional phase known as, quote, sede vacante, meaning while the seat is vacant. For the next few weeks, the governance of the Catholic Church will be overseen by the College of Cardinals as they prepare for the monumental task of selecting a new pontiff.
The Pope's passing is a significant moment not only for the millions of faithful across the globe. It also comes with many consequences and responsibilities for the Catholic Church itself.
We expected Pope Francis to join the house of the Holy Father for some time now. Of course, it always comes as a big blow. Still, we're not afraid. There has always been continuity in the Catholic Church.
What happens after the Pope passes is laid out in a strict and precise set of rules, worked out over centuries. Firstly, the papal apartments are sealed and the Pope's ring is broken as a way to prevent any changes to his final will and to mark the end of his reign. The Church will then spend the next 9 days in mourning. It is also during that time that the Pope will be buried. Papal funerals usually gather tens of thousands of faithful from all over the globe, and this time is unlikely to be any different. 2 to 3 weeks after the funeral, the cardinals will gather to elect a new leader of the Catholic Church.
The conclave is when the cardinals come to Rome to elect a new pope. There are about 140 under the age of 80 who will enter into the Sistine Chapel to vote who should be the new pope. Each day they will have several ballots. They will decide who they want to be pope. At the end of each ballot, they will burn their ballots, and you can see the smoke from above Sistine Chapel.
The famous smoke from a special chimney installed on the roof of the Sistine Chapel has to be white to signify the cardinals agreeing on the new pope. If it's black, it means the vote was inconclusive and they have to deliberate again. Before the conclave gathers in May, it is the College of Cardinals which oversees the Catholic Church, although typically no major decisions are made in that time. A major change requested by Pope Francis before he passed regarding his funeral is that he will not be laid to rest in St. Peter's Basilica, a traditional resting place for most popes. Instead, he opted for the St. Mary Major Basilica across town, signifying his close connection to the Virgin Mary. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
The Catholic Church needs a new leader, and the world is already speculating on who will succeed the reformist Pope Francis. A conclave is to begin no later than May 10th, with 135 cardinals eligible to vote in the election of a new pontiff. A few candidates are mentioned as most likely successors to the throne of St. Peter. A conservative from Hungary, Peter Erdo, known for his hard stance against migration. A traditionalist from Guinea, Robert Sarah, the most famous critic of the late Pope Francis. Moderate Peter Turkson from Ghana, who's been vocal on climate change and economic inequalities, while calling for decriminalization of homosexuality in African states. Another moderate, Pietro Parolin, who is most likely to ensure continuity on the international stage, as he's been the Vatican's key negotiator in recent dealings with China. And on the progressive end of the spectrum, Italian Matteo Zuppi, the Holy See's peace envoy to Ukraine. And finally, Luiz Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, known for criticizing the Church's harsh stance on divorce and same-sex relationships. With 108 out of 135 cardinals eligible to vote having been approved by Pope Francis, many believe the progressive wing has a bigger chance than the conservatives. However, as history shows, the results of the vote are often unexpected. The faithful will have to wait patiently for their answer until white smoke comes out of the Sistine Chapel chimney. And that brings us to the end of World News at 2 p.m. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.